As the EU continues to struggle with the refugees with members to address the crisis, calls have grown for the countries that created the mess to deal with it. South African President Jacob Zuma said the West must take responsibility for the refugee crisis it created. He said the flood of refugees from Africa and Middle East was triggered by foreign interference and undermining the security situation.
The consistent, systematic bombing of NATO forces undermined the security and caused conflicts that are continuing.
Zuma was addressing foreign diplomats and politicians in the South African city of Pretoria. Several issues were discussed, some of them being the African and Middle East conflict, the refugee crisis. Zuma slammed some Western and regional countries for their continued warmongering policies in Africa and the Middle East. He said the Syrian refugee crisis is the result of foreign interference in the internal affairs of independent nations.
The international community must not support external military interference or any action in Syria that is not in line with the Charter of the United Nations.
Elsewhere in his speech, which came days ahead of the UN General Assembly, the South African president said he would continue to push for reforms in the United Nations, especially in the Security Council. Zuma said developing countries will also advocate for the reform of the UN system to make it more responsive to the interests and needs of the majority of its members.
For Africa, a continent with more than 1 billion people, which is not represented in the United Nations Security Council as a permanent member.
Zuma will address the upcoming 70th session of the UN General Assembly next week. Refugee, Press TV, Pretoria.